say what you want to say or not say, or I guess start out with just where are you from? Where were you born?
All right. I was born in Tacoma, Washington, 1992. I believe St. Joe's Hospital.
You grew up with mom and dad.
I grew up with my mom. My dad kind of left our family when I was 2, I believe. He was still in the greater Tacoma area until I was about 6 or 7. Then he moved to North Carolina.
How was growing up for you?
Growing up was pretty awesome. It was pretty easy in terms of being the child, and as far as our poverty went, I didn't realize until much later that we were poor. My mom was a workhorse, very much a can-do type of person, and definitely believed in letting kids be kids as much as possible, and so didn't really have a lot of reality, as it were, crashing down on me too young.
And siblings?
Yeah, I grew up with one younger brother, and yeah, it was just the two of us for the longevity of my childhood.
Now you say you didn't realize you were in poverty until later. Well, What do you mean by that?
My mom kind of refused to allow us to experience too much of the reality that comes with being impoverished. We didn't really want for anything. We never really felt poor, and the area that we grew up in was technically like a poor part of town, but due to local philanthropy and just remodels of schools, we never really were at a loss of tech or any of the necessary items to make schooling possible. So yeah, I didn't really realize that we were poor until much later in my childhood, probably closer to adulthood. And around that time, I was permitted to get a job anyway, as long as my schooling didn't suffer. So as soon as I could work, I was working, and I, at that point, kind of took over for any of the extracurricular activities or expenses that I could afford myself. So
You stayed at home for how long?
I stayed until I was 18, and then I went to college. I went to college in New York City for acting for a year or a year and a half. I had to end that, unfortunately, sooner than planned, and didn't end up getting my completion. But it was still like a very life-changing experience that I'm glad that I experienced and got the chance and opportunity to be a part of, you know.
And you in touch with your dad or no?
No, my father is unfortunately deceased at this point. We weren't close, didn't really have a rapport, as it were. We knew each other as well as anyone knows an estranged parent, I guess. He knew where I was. I knew where he was. I didn't find out that he passed until months later, and it was only because one of his nieces and nephews from North Carolina getting in contact with my mom through Facebook, and then my mom ultimately let me know the next time I was down to Tacoma to visit for Christmas of last year, not this last Christmas, but the Christmas before. She let me know, and it was a myriad of emotions, but for the most part, just a bit of regret facing our refusal to kind of admit each of our own wrongdoings and shortcomings, as it were. And while I don't truly have a capacity to miss him. I do think that I missed out on the ability to kind of connect places in my genealogy that I now will be at a loss for, but yeah, we weren't really close. So
What about your brother? You guys close?
my brother and I are pretty close as brothers go. We have different fathers, but we were both raised by my mother singularly, and so it never really was a pertinent topic. We were raised to believe that our brotherhood was as strong as any other, and I, will always love the kid. So.
And is he in contact? You guys in contact?
I'm not really in contact currently with any of my family. I know that if I put forth the effort in that way, that they are there. But given my current living situation and their current reality, there's just not a lot of things that cross between the two lifestyles, and so. I choose to live out here in the way that I do, and they choose to live out there. So we just kind of make time for each other when it's necessary,
So you live by choice, this lifestyle.
Yeah, I consider it a choice because I am aware of my own abilities and lack thereof, as it were. I do believe that everybody has a sense of responsibility to the life that they lead, even if they are there by matter of series of unfortunate consequences or circumstances. Like, I don't believe that we are purely victims in our lives. I do believe a lot of it has to do with what we do personally, and so by that idea, I am here by choice. I didn't choose to be made homeless, but I choose to continue to be homeless. So,
tell me more about that. What do you mean?
There were several things that kind of led me down this path. My last employment was with a company that is very tangibly a part of the homeless community in Seattle in a beneficial way. They do a lot to help the homeless community, but I unfortunately was not a client to them, but more of an employee. And so when the termination of my employment did happen, there weren't many avenues for me to take that would befit them helping me. And so while I do promote their philanthropy in like the homeless community, I do thoroughly believe that they as a social enterprise are just as likely to be victims of human folly as any other business. And so I have a hard time holding too much against the entity that is the company now, but the management, of course, I have some quarrels with, and because of the way that ended in the time period that it ended in conjunction with the pandemic that just occurred, my termination led to my eviction, led to my homelessness.
And how long ago was that?
It was at the beginning of COVID. I would say probably I was terminated about a month or so before COVID reached pandemic level, and because of the pandemic, there was an ensuing citywide moratorium on rent, which I coasted on for a while. The unfortunate circumstance of my eviction was that it had started with enough time period passed to where there was exactly about 13 to 14 days left in the process before I would be officially removed from the area. And while I was covered by citywide moratorium, there was a brief 2-week period between citywide moratorium and countrywide moratorium that was exactly enough time for them to finish the eviction process. And so I was about a day off of being fine. I probably wouldn't have been homeless had I had like another 24 hours. It was that serendipitous, if you were. The things, just the way that things fell. And so that 2-week period between the two coverages kind of allotted for them to finish the process of my eviction, and then I was evicted the day before countrywide moratorium went into effect.
What was that like?
It was a very surreal experience. I think part of me was admittedly only dealing with it moment to moment, kind of allowing for no deeper than this moment's effect on myself to really lay itself down. I fortunately, kind of foreseeing this happening, had made friends with several homeless people in my immediate community, and I took to seeking those people out immediately, just to kind of create some sort of a safety net around myself, and they were fortunately there when I needed them to be. And while not everyone I had expected was there, I did manage to survive, and eventually it became a lot easier to do so. Became acclimated, I guess, to the reality of homelessness here.
And that was in Tacoma, or
that was here.
And then, how long have you been in Ballard?
So I've been in Ballard since essentially the day I was homeless. Before that, I lived in Wallingford. The Wallingford was the first area of Seattle for me to call home. I moved there probably 2017, and was there until my eviction. The month of the the same month as the countrywide moratorium effect. And so I knew the area pretty well, and I had an experience with Ballard because of my ex-partner, where I knew several of the social programs that were available to homeless people were kind of connecting in Ballard, and it was one bus away. So I kind of just I had been walking the pathways of a homeless person the entire time during the moratorium that I was covered, and so when I actually experienced being part of it, I eventually came out here. I think I tried several other places around Seattle, and didn't really feel all that comfortable, just because I didn't know their way. Specifically, didn't really have a lot of specific social programs or knowledge of anything geared towards homeless people there. And eventually, when I came here, it felt like I was still adjacent, just barely outside of Wallingford, and it still had kind of that hometownish feel that I think Wallingford kind of encaptures. And so I stayed here because it felt the most like home while dealing with the apparent difference in lifestyle. Yeah.
How do you cope?
Honestly, I don't know how I coped. I know I had, barring the my employment, like facing the realities of the life I was leading before I was evicted. I did take to drugs. I eventually became addicted to methamphetamine, and that definitely played a role in my eventual termination. And so I definitely clung to that addiction and still do in a manner of ways. And yeah, so definitely drugs and distraction. I took up several new hobbies or ventures to kind of, I don't know, nullify the effects of being homeless and kind of, I don't know, deal with them in the way that I felt was the most comfortable for me. The scope of artistic creativity kind of made it a lot less, as it were, an active change that I was experiencing when I had the privilege of looking through everything through a creative and kind of a scientific lens, because it is a new community and anthropologically, I think, anthropologically, something like that. It was just a whole new world, and so I kind of delve into allowing the nuances of being in a new community and seeing the world through a different perspective, and with new wonder and fervor for experiencing the new day to day that I would be in, and in that I was able to deal with the harsh parts a lot easier, I think.
What type of art are you creating?
There have been a lot of hardships that come along with being homeless in Seattle. I'm sure that they bleed over to different parts of the world, but specifically Seattle has a progressive perspective, I guess, that denotes your right to be homeless, but the way that pans out isn't necessarily the most safe or, I guess, welcoming atmosphere to the homeless community. Within the first 3 months of my homelessness, had experienced being shot at, multiple forms of intimidation, destruction of property that was mine or my roommates. I faced attempted poisonings, mental illness from the sides of both homeless and non-homeless alike, prejudice, discrimination. Yeah, I had grew up, my life as a young man was sheltered. My mom did her best to shelter us so that we didn't have to experience a lot of the realities of the area that we lived in. And because of that, even as a young black man in Tacoma, in the Hilltop area, I had experienced very few, I would say, true attempts on my life. That was one of the first things that I had to get used to when I was out here. It's kind of the reality that people feel so justified in their hatred towards certain classes of people, or the way that certain people live, that they feel themselves justified in any sort of offensive behavior towards us. And so that's a sad reality that I'm still kind of dealing with years later. I think it's unfortunate, but I am still surprised by the level of inhumanity that people will demonstrate to those who don't fall in their same socioeconomic class. And yeah, I mean, all I really can do is try not to lose my faith in the species of human and be optimistic. I find more often than not, even in this social class, the more you smile, the happier you are, you know. But there are things that you can't smile past. You just kind of have to get over.
What would you want people of Seattle to know?
It's been so long since I've been asked that in a way that I felt was authentic. The people out here, the people in homelessness that are dealing with homelessness in Seattle just want to live. They don't think that they are entitled to, you know, some mass disruption of your day-to-day lives. They don't want to plague you with any sort of crime or ill intent. They just want to live, man. They just want to be able to wake up every day and find something to smile about, have something that's worth waking up every day, and they want to be able to ask for help when they need it, and not be held responsible for the actions of the mentally imbalanced, because I feel like that's a class that exists in every single, you know, tier of class or class that exists in our day-to-day world. I deal with mental illness on a regular, being homeless, but I deal with mental illness on a regular when I wasn't homeless too. I don't think that it's something that should be attributed to one class or another. And by further creating a separation of the two lifestyles, all you're really doing is allowing for an island to be built around me, and people like me who may not have jobs but do consider themselves to be responsible for their own lives and for the lives of people in their community. I think whatever you want to call it, I think there's some mass propaganda that's being fed to the people of the city and to the country that denotes our and our, meaning the homeless's, responsibility for the way that things are going. But the homeless people have never been the effectors. We've always been the affected. And if it seems as though the country or the city or the town or the neighborhood is heading to shit, just know that we were the first ones to start bracing it. We were the first ones to be met by the shitstorm. We're on the brink. We're on the outside, the edge, and we felt it long before you guys did. Many of us, I know for a fact, have been vocalizing the coming of a change that would be extremely volatile, and I think now it's being attributed to our community more than it's being informed from our community. And so I personally don't know how to combat that beyond trying to stay as communicative as possible. I don't and I've never liked the concept of barriers between people, and I think that the easiest way to kind of escape any sort of persecution by the people is to confuse the people with whom is responsible for and what is responsible for the hardships that are being faced. And by doing that, creating a scapegoat of the chosen, society to blame. I think if you go out and you make an honest attempt uh, to relate to another human being, even today, you will be surprised at how effortlessly things become synonymous between the lifestyle choices or lifestyle differences. We are so much more connected by our similarities than we've ever been by our differences. And while there is something interesting to be had to see the world from the perspective of another, ultimately you can only do that because you have the same perspective parameters. You can only notice the differences that I see in my perspective because you know what it's like to have the ability to see it all. Like we're not that different. Some of us may make that difficult, but a normal, I think, response to trauma is to close yourself off, and that's kind of why I've made it a mission of mine not to. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for using your voice. Appreciate it.
Thank you for asking.
You open for a hug?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I know there's another story with you.